Hello, this is Dylan Moore with iRead TV coming to you today. What day is today? It's Thursday. It's Thursday, December 9th, 2021, and we've got our co-host, Nima Majur, on the line, and once again, we have David Cole coming to bring us some juicy details from it's the most sacred place on earth, isn't it? Hollywood? I have that right? It's the holiest
sacred
place.
Sacred or profane, yeah, one or the other.
Flip a coin, right? And we're going to be talking about racial apartheid, the new racial apartheid of Hollywood. And before we get into that, I just want to let everyone know where you could find our material. So if you head over to ireda.tv, our website, and up on the top, you'll see a link for videos, and you'll see a link for social media. We're on all the old, decaying, decrepit, censorship-friendly social media still, like Facebook and YouTube, although we are starting to get censored. So if you want to see the entirety of our media, go check out one of the other places that we're on. And we're on... we're not on everything, but it's almost everything, right? So
we're in Telegram, Gab, Rumble,
Odyssey, BitChute,
all the decentralized platforms.
So if you're on it and it's even vaguely popular, we're likely on it too. So follow us wherever meets your fancy. So David, thanks again for coming on to tell us some more sacred stuff from the sacred place on earth.
That's always a pleasure, Dylan. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And so, and I forgot to mention, because we are going to be talking about an article that you wrote at Talkies Magazine. David, of course, is a columnist over at Talkies Magazine. And the recent article, of course, that you wrote was about this new racial apartheid that's happening in Hollywood. And why don't you just jump straight into telling us what's going on?
Well, to give a little background, back from 1987, for quite some time into the 90s, I worked in casting. My very first job in the business in Hollywood was as assistant in casting for a production company in 1987. It was something I never talked about when I was doing the Holocaust revisionism thing full-time, which is from like 1989 until 95, because I wouldn't have been allowed to do it, obviously. No one could ever know that I worked in casting back then, because they didn't use the word cancel, but I would have been canceled. I could only do it if I kept it a totally separate world under a separate name. And there was no internet.
I just like to point out that you were canceled before it was cool.
Yes.
That's fair to say.
I was canceled before there was even a word for it. And the good thing is, back in the late 80s, you could live that kind of double life because there was no internet. There was no social media. There was no way to look somebody up or do kind of a background. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the great internet that was going to liberate us all.
Yes.
How's that worked out?
So casting, which is the process of, and I'll explain this. I think most of your viewers probably know the dynamics of it, but I will quickly explain it just for those of you who may, because I know a lot of people really don't like Hollywood, so they make it a point of never learning anything about the specifics.
That would be me. Tell it for my benefit.
They find Hollywood so distasteful. But to explain a little bit about how it works in the business for actors. An actor starts out by getting an agent, and that agent signs that actor to an exclusive agreement. An agent in LA an actor can only have one agent for movies and TV, and then a second agent for commercials, and then they can have a modeling agent as well if that's what they're into. So the agent represents the actor, and the agent only gets paid when the actor does. The agent gets anywhere from 10 to 15% of whatever jobs the agent gets the actor. So we've got the actor signs with the agent. The agent now has to move that product. He's got to find work for that actor. The casting director is kind of the gatekeeper. When a movie or TV show or commercial or anything like that starts in production, and they need to find their actors, they hire the casting director. The casting director's job is to let the agents know every day the casting directors would say, okay, today I need an old man, about 80 years old, white and wrinkly. I need a kid, Chinese, maybe 12 years old, speaks fluent Chinese, Mandarin, and English. The casting director will put out there what they need for that day, and the agents will submit their actors. So you have the actor has the agent, the producers have the casting director, and the casting director and the agent meet in the middle, and the casting director gives out the roles, and the agent submits the actor. So that's the time-honored process. There are always workarounds. There are some directors. Clint Eastwood, for example, doesn't like to go through casting directors. He likes to just meet actors direct himself. It scared the shit out of a lot of actors over the years, because they get an audition for a Clint Eastwood film and they go in expecting to meet the casting director, but there's Clint, right there. He's like, all right, show me what you fucking have. And actors, it unnerves them a little bit. In fact, Eastwood ended up switching that out a bit, and now, like for his last maybe 15 years of movies, he only sees videotapes of actors because he just found it unnerved actors too much for him to be in the room with them. But casting directors tend to be female, heavily female, some lesbians, but generally the profile of a casting director, and there are famous male ones as well, I mean, it's not all female, but the general profile of a casting director is a woman who tried to be an actress when she was young, failed, but learned enough about the business and had the kind of bossy mentality. They tend to, a lot of Jewish women in casting. So the casting director is often herself a failed former actress. Now, sometimes this can help a performer. As an example, you remember the actress Alicia Silverstone?
No.
There was a time when she was
Clueless, right?
What's that?
She wasn't Clueless, right?
Well, she was in Batman and Robin, and she was in The Crush, and she had one really big, Clueless. Clueless. That was the big one I was thinking of. Yeah, you were right. When you said Clueless, that's what I was thinking. A totally different movie. So Alicia Silverstone, when she went out for an early audition, she auditioned in front of a casting director who saw in her what the casting director was. When this was a casting director who had at one point, like 20 years earlier, been a young blonde Jewish girl trying to make it in the business and failed as an actress. And now here's Alicia Silverstone, a young blonde Jewish girl auditioning before, and the casting director felt kind of affinity. It was like, hey, you're who I was trying to be, and I'm going to help you as a way of helping me. It will be a blessing, not a shanda. So Alicia Silverstone, casting directors have that power. They are so influential as gatekeepers that if they see something in you they like, they could literally hand you a career. Conversely,
it's not necessarily skill or talent, right? If I like you just because of some quirk that I have, that might be good enough.
And conversely, there was a casting director named Barbara Clayman, who was also a grizzled Jewish, former, long time ago failed actress. Barbara Clayman hated young women who reminded her of what she used to be. She would make life terrible for them. Every male actor in the business loved auditioning in front of Barbara Clayman because, you're wonderful, handsome, charming. You've got the part. But women would come in, and she would be ruthless to them. Her thing was, it was tough for me, so I'm going to make it even tougher for you. So women hate that. And we're talking about the early to mid '90s now. All my actress friends were so frightened; they were petrified of ever having to stand before Barbara Clayman. And one other example before I get to the more current stuff. There's a casting director named Deborah Aquila, Sicilian woman, and boy, does she look it. She looks like somebody whose husband has bodies buried in the backyard. She looks like Tony Soprano is her husband, and but she actually is married to an Israeli Jew. But Deborah Aquila is known as one of those casting directors who just has a magic gift for it. And some of the things that she's known for hopefully you're not too young, Dylan, to know the actor Edward Norton.
If I don't, it may not be necessarily due to my age.
I mean, Jesus Christ, he's won a couple of Oscars.
Definitely seen him, yeah.
American History, like you said at the beginning, that there's the people who try to avoid Hollywood. I'm one of them.
Surely your viewers will at least know him from American History X, but you know that he and then for a while he dated, I think, Salma Hayek, one of those similar actress types. Anyway, Edward Norton is an Academy Award-winning, very famous actor, and but the movie that made him famous and won him his first Oscar nomination was a movie with Richard Gere, where Norton played a serial killer, or is he? Mystery. Now, because Richard Gere played the lawyer in that film, the producers wanted a star of equal magnitude, Richard Gere and someone equally famous. And Deborah Aquila saw Edward Norton at the audition and was like, no, this is the guy. You're going to thank me for casting him. And they're like, but he's a nobody. He doesn't have a single credit to his name. And she's like, just do it and trust me, he will make the film. And lo and behold, Edward Norton was the thing that made the film. I mean, Richard Gere gave a typical Richard Gere performance. The twist at the end, is he a killer or isn't he? Oh, maybe he is. It's been done before. But Edward Norton got an Oscar nomination and put the film on the map. The other thing Deborah Aquila is really known for, okay, please at least tell me you've heard of The Shawshank Redemption.
Yes, I have heard of The Shawshank. I have seen
it. Thank you.
I know that movie.
Well, in the Stephen King novella that it's based on, the Morgan Freeman character is very specifically white because he's an Irishman. And his name, the character's name of Red, is because he's an Irishman with bright red hair. When they were casting Shawshank Redemption, and they had Tim Robbins already cast, and they're looking for the guy to play Red, and Deborah Aquila says, cast Morgan Freeman in that role, you won't regret. And they're like, no, but it's an Irishman, and it's going to be out. And she's like, trust me, he's going to be the thing everybody remembers from the movie. He's the right man for the role. And of course, lo and behold, it is, you know, if you're going to mention a Morgan Freeman movie, that's always going to be one of the two that you're going to mention. And they kept in the line that is furious in the novella when Tim Robbins' character, when Andy Dufresne asks Red, why do they call you Red? And he says, because I'm Irish. They kept that line in, but now they played it for a
joke.
laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a joke now. So this little preamble has simply been to explain the power of casting directors as gatekeepers. They can literally make a career, or they can fuck you up if they don't like you. Now, as in the column that is running currently this week in Tacky Mag, and I'm sure you'll have a link down below if people want to just read the whole thing themselves, but to summarize, there has been, for several decades, there's been a push on the part of non-white advocacy organizations like the NAACP and MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, and this one guy, Guy Aoki, who runs a one-man Asian censorship group. Guy Aoki is just amazing because he doesn't have members, he doesn't have dues, he doesn't have a structure. He sits alone all day and watches everything on TV. And he's been doing that since before there was the internet. So he used to just have like 30 TVs in his house. And he would just be watching everything. And then when he would see something he thought was insulting to Asians, he'd be like, oh, you stop that right now. And this guy, he has never
That's
been
determination.
Told,
man, I had no idea about that.
Guy Aoki has never been told no.
You know, I just want to get out of jury duty. So I just filled out the form and I wrote, I love chinks. Thank you. That's the joke, you know. It's a joke. It's a joke that points.
So where is the joke?
Well, I have to say that's not the biggest laugh I've ever heard a joke get, but it did get a laugh. And considering the setup, here stacked against that joke, that means that joke is still funny.
Really?
Well, if with this setup, that joke still got any kind of a laugh, you got to give something to that joke.
Well, can I point something out for the initiative, for those who don't know? I mean, calling a Chinese person a chink is the same thing as calling a black person nigger.
Absolutely.
This is the way we take it, and we don't think that racial slurs should be used in this kind of off-the-cuff kind of way, because it gives more permission for people to use it in less appropriate situations.
Even the NAACP and the ADL have lost a few fights where they've tried to censor something and it doesn't work and they're turned down and they're rebuffed. Guy Aoki has never been told no. There 2 times in a row, he saw a joke on Conan O'Brien and he just called him, "Oh, you insulted my ancestor." And the next night, Conan O'Brien's like, "I would like to apologize for that joke. And I love all of my Asian viewers, and I'm so sorry." I've never understood the Guy Aoki magic, because he's just one man. And there's nothing he can do to you if you say no to him. Or maybe there is, and that's an inside secret. I don't know. Maybe he's killed a few people.
Maybe his organization is the ninjas that he doesn't publicly talk about.
I would love one day for Guy Aoki to come after me for something. In fact, I'll just say right now, Chinaman. And hopefully he'll see this, because I want him to come after me, because I just want to know what happens to you when you say no to the son of a bitch. So one more time, Guy. Oh, Chinaman. Oh, okay. Now that's always going to set him off. That is always going to set him off. He made the Simpsons apologize. The fucking Simpsons, when they were popular, when the show was really big. And so
has he come after South Park yet?
Oh yeah. But he stopped after a while because he saw other people failing. He saw other people trying to attack South Park, and they were being rebuffed. And I don't think he wanted to run the risk of Parker and Stone rebuffing him. And
having that one loss on his track record. Yeah.
When he dies, he wants to retire undefeated. But still, Guy, you heard what I just said, okay? So you come after me, and I will tell you to fuck yourself, and then let's just see what happens. Okay, sorry for that tangent. The point being, for several decades, there were these ethnic, racial advocacy groups who didn't like the fact that there were too many white faces in movies and TV. Their stats were often cooked. For example, going back even to 1997, going back even there, blacks were actually overrepresented on American TV. They were starring in shows in greater numbers than their percentage of the population. But a lot of what these groups would sometimes
David, this really sounds like hate facts to me.
Yeah. There's a guy at the LA Times, Greg Braxton, black fellow. He's been doing the Black Hollywood beat for 20 some odd years. And what Greg Braxton would do is to try to make it seem like blacks were not overrepresented, is that he simply wouldn't count ensemble shows like Homicide: Life on the Street or ER or any of the Law and Order shows. And so if you take ensemble shows out of the picture, then it's like, blacks aren't working at all. Because you're basically now you're just looking mainly at sitcoms and one-man shows and Seinfeld. So there was a big push in the early 2000s to try to force more non-white faces in front of the camera. And the NAACP partnered with the free TV networks, four. I mean, Fox was a network by then. They partnered with the TV networks and with the movie studios. And they got the brilliant idea that the way they would force this issue on the business would be they would force casting directors to see any person of color who wanted to come in their office. Now, that is literally like telling the Queen of England that she's got to go see a school play. It is so against the propriety, the time-honored, consecrated propriety of the business. Casting directors don't see just anybody. Actors send them talent that is pre-vetted, talent that has been judged proper for the role. And so by the time you get into the casting director's office, you've been
vetting.
You've gone through a couple of layers of filtering. And now the NAACP and the studios and networks were telling casting directors, you have to have like a full day every week where if somebody, as long as they're Black or Hispanic or Asian or Arab or whatever, you've got to have them sit in front of you and you've got to listen to them and hear them read whatever monologue or whatever they want to do. Now, casting directors hated this because, as I said, it goes against, it's beneath them, it's beneath their station, and they never want to see unvetted talent. So, but they also didn't want to be called racist. And the NAACP made it clear that you better go along with this or Jesse Jackson will be picketing outside your office. So for a couple of weeks, the casting directors had to go through this nonsense. And what they found, what everybody found, was there's a reason for the filtering. There's a reason that the actor gets the agent first and the agent tests out the actor and then sends them along. Because when you just have bums coming in your office, like, man, I won't be an actor. This is to be, motherfucker. and nobody is, they're not talented. They're just full of themselves and they stink and they have lice and they didn't have headshots. Every actor has to have a headshot, a photo. Sometimes you have many, funny, smiling one, a serious one. They didn't have headshots. They didn't have resumes. And casting directors were gritting their teeth, hating this. But also, it wasn't working for what the NAACP wanted either, because all of these scum that was crawling into the office of casting directors, they couldn't act. So it's not like they were hireable anyway. No producer, Dick Wolf, the guy who does all the Law and Order shows, he's not going to hire a guy who can't act. None of these, no producer's ever going to hire someone who's legitimately bad. I mean, there are a lot of actors who are weak, quite a few, but generally no producer is going to hire someone who's just a bum off the street. So after about a month or so, this whole operation with the casting directors was called off, and the LA Times kind of admitted, that Greg Braxton guy we talked about kind of admitted, yeah, it didn't really work. So everybody kind of went back to lick their wounds and figure out, okay, let's try to figure something else out. And in the meantime, though, the business did start to get more diverse, but on its own. Black shows were increasingly popular, and it just became normal that on every crime ensemble show there would be one or two Black leads. So the business was starting to diversify organically through talent, through actors who knew what they were doing and who were getting cast because of their skill. And then the fucking George Floyd thing happened last year, and everything changed because after George Floyd, corporate America just went batshit trying to bend a knee to BLM. And the racial advocates saw their opening to finally, pretty much get white faces out of movies, out of streaming, off the TV set. So when BLM was at its height of bullying power last summer, summer of 2020, they went to the streaming services, which are now, they're the main game in town. Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime. The streaming is the most important thing in Hollywood right now, far more important than the TV networks, when it comes to original content. So they went to the streaming services and they were like, in memory of George Floyd, and also if you don't want your building burned down, we want strict rules demanding a certain number of people of color and fewer numbers of white people. And Amazon Prime was the first to come out with the actual numbers, and they've been adopted since by Netflix and Hulu. But basically the numbers are, whites are capped, white hiring in terms of actors. Whites are capped at no more than 30% white male in any project, and no more than 30% white female in any project. And that white female number also has to include a certain amount of trannies. So that
So
white
men.
female number is not just white females. It's actually white men in dresses. So you cap the whites, 30% male, 30% female, plus trannies, and then 40% is mandated to have to be people of color, primarily blacks, because too many Hispanics look too white. So when we say that 40% quota is primarily for blacks, Asians can take advantage of it too, of course, and then the really dark looking, the mestizo Indian looking Mexicans can take advantage of it. So we have these figures that have now actually been locked in, codified. So it's no longer just a matter of, hey, we're going to try to up diversity, whatever that even means. But now they got these figures. And one thing I wrote about a couple months ago is that Amazon, because I tried to be in touch with every single person involved in the Amazon Prime Studios, their original streaming production arm. No one in Amazon will explain where Jews fit in. Let's say Jerry Seinfeld, who's an actor. And there's many, many Jewish actors. Let's just take Seinfeld, okay? Is he a white guy? Or is he classified as non-white? Because Amazon is forcing producers to have to fill out that checklist to meet the 30%, 30%, the 40% thing. Okay, where do you put your Jewish actors in that? And the reason Amazon won't answer that question, the reason they can't answer it, is it's a lose-lose for them, whichever they say. If they say that Jews are, if they count as non-whites, well, that's going to piss off the blacks. They're going to be like, wait a minute, Jews are already 50, 60, 70% of the business, and now you're taking up our places. You're taking up our space, man, with a Jew. But if they say that Jews are white, if they count as the whites who are capped, well, now Amazon admits to being the first major corporation since Nazi Germany to cap Jews for being Jews. So they can't ever say whether Jews are the white.
This is all so sorry. This is all so stupid. I need a 2-second break here. That was so much stupid. Okay, please continue. Okay.
So I still occasionally do casting gigs. Always, never is David Cole, the writer, the Holocaust guy. But I have a lot of friends in the business who know that I'm good at casting, and as long as I never say publicly that I'm working for them, they let me work for them. Just a matter of, they know I'm discreet about it, but they also want my skill as having over 30 years of knowing actors and doing this kind of thing. So now that these figures, this cap and this quota has been in place for most of this year, I am seeing the trickle-down effect. The trickle-down effect is now when you get down to ground level, and ground level is an actor who's just starting out, an actor who has not yet met an agent, so therefore is not yet represented, therefore has not yet started going out to meet casting directors on auditions. At ground level, the trickle-down of the quota and caps is making white actors practically unemployable, because what agents are doing now, because roles for whites are artificially capped and therefore a scarcity has been created, artificially created, agents don't want to bring in new white people because they're having a hard enough time finding work for the white actors they already represent. So it's like agents, you can be the most talented or attractive, if you're female or whatever, young, starting out white actor, and an agent's just not going to touch you right now. Meanwhile, agents are actually not really against the cap and the quotas, because this artificial quota for black actors means that agents are now being able to move product that they had not been able to move previously. I'm talking, obviously, you've got so many wonderful black actors. Black actors have been as much a part of Hollywood as whites, as anybody else, in terms of just entertainers, as actors, as singers, as comedians. But you also have, there have always been a lot of black actors who they look like Leslie Jones. You know, they look like they're uncastable in a lot of things. And now, because the quota for black actors is higher than there are black actors in the business. So every black actor is working double shifts now. For them, it's great. All of my friends, my actor friends who are black, they're not stopping working. That they're doing 2-3 things in a week sometimes. And so for them, it is great. And some of these are some of my closest friends in the world. So I'm not trying to wish harm on them. No one wants to end their friend's gravy train because
and it's not their fault, right?
Yeah, it's not their fault.
Go get the money if they're going to give it to you, right?
Yeah. So this is a couple of my black actor friends have read my pieces, my columns about this, and they're like, "Man, you're trying to fuck me up, aren't you?" I say, "No, I don't want you to lose work because the problem with the quota and the caps is the assumption that there is a finite number of entertainment products. But in fact, there is you could have as many shows on streaming as you want. You could produce as many shows as you're willing to pay for.
Well, now you can't. Now you can't because of this kind of stuff.
Right.
So I wonder in part if that's just a strategy to get to limiting
overall
the amount
scarcity.
Of shows.
Overall scarcity of shows.
Creating artificial.
But it certainly could be. And what's interesting about the trickle-down effect I was talking about, in theory, that cap and the quota is also supposed to apply behind the scenes, but it isn't. They're not pushing it there. And the BLM advocates aren't pushing it either because the whole goal from the beginning was to get non-white faces in front of the camera. And also, a lot of it comes down to a kind of social engineering, a desire that a lot of blacks in the media have clearly enunciated over the years, a desire to change the beauty standard. They don't like the fact that there's a certain beauty standard in the business, in society, I should say. I mean, really all around the world. I mean, they have done polls for years. In terms of beauty, white women tend to score high, even in the third world. But of course, activists will say that's because they're conditioned. They've been hypnotized by the white colonizers. So part of it is social engineering to try to shift the beauty standards so that somebody who looks like Shirley from What's Happening, and you won't get that reference, Dylan, look up Shirley from What's Happening. Someone who looks like her now is the Marilyn Monroe. And the Marilyn Monroe is now the actress who just plays like a crack whore. That's what they want to do. A lot of it is based on racial resentment, especially a lot of black women, the kind who write for Teen Vogue and elsewhere, these black women who talk nothing but bitterness, that people don't like their hair, people don't like their noses, people don't like this, don't like that. So a lot of it is very much based on bitterness and resentment. So there's all of this now has contributed to a highly toxic environment for any young actor who wants to get in the biz. And I have a couple of friends who live abroad who are actors who have been thinking of moving here one day. And one of them, blonde girl, very attractive, lives in South Africa. And she's been looking to get out for a while. And I had to tell her a few months ago, I had to say, this might not be the best time because you're not going to work here. She's actually working more as a white actress in Johannesburg than she would here. That's the great irony of it. The country that kind of gave us a standard of apartheid is now actually, and then switched it on its head to where the blacks took over. And the whites are now oftentimes the ones who are suffering. But a white actor can still work more in Johannesburg right now than they could in LA.
Has anyone tried being trans black yet? I am not joking.
Yeah. I don't know if that could actually successfully be pulled off.
But couldn't I sue over it though? Right? Because if the women must also be men, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Shouldn't some of the blacks must also be whites or vice versa or whatever? I mean, if these rules are so mushy and mashy, can't we just mush and mash them? However we want?
In fact, though, the flow is going in the opposite direction. In fact, they are so obsessed with the purity of these classes, these racial classes classifications they're creating. You're now getting dark-skinned black actresses demanding a reduction in the roles for light-skinned black actresses. And you're getting again, Shirley from What's Happening, and that's all you got to look at to see what I'm talking about. You're getting these Shirleys from What's Happening who are now saying it's not enough that blacks are getting all the roles. We want the dark blacks to get all the roles. And we don't want the Halle Berrys or the Dorothy Dandridges, not that she's acting much these days anyway, being long dead, but they're now demanding an additional cap and quota for light-skinned, or as any black would say, light-skinned in it, women, and they want only the dark ones to get the roles. So that's how.
And I mean, are they going to have like a color sheet that they bring up to you and go, okay, you are a 3A, and we need at least 3B for this role, so you're out.
Well, this is old info, but you may not know it. But back there was a period before LBJ, before affirmative action, before welfare, before all that. There's a period where black communities across the nation were starting to thrive. And one of the things that had been around for a while, in fact, even since the decades after the Civil War, were black social clubs for the more well-off blacks, the ones who tended to, not the sharecroppers, but the ones who typically tended to be mixed race and went to the foundational black universities, became PhDs or whatever. Those black social clubs, and this continued up through the 40s and 50s, those black social clubs had what was called the paper bag test.
What test?
The paper bag test, like a brown grocery bag. You would have to be, anybody applying for membership in that social club would have to have the brown paper bag put next to their head. And if they were darker than the brown paper bag, they didn't get in. So you had to be lighter than the bag.
I'm just...
And this is, again, this is known for a long time.
And I'm not surprised, but I'm surprised because the education I received, it was hammered into my head so hard, don't see color, don't see color, don't see color, don't see color. And white people have just completely taken on this refusal to see color. Right. Whereas from every corner I see from the black community, it's like all they see. Right. Down to the last pigment.
Yeah.
And it's just so bizarre to me.
It is all about seeing color. They're even making kids' cartoons now. I think there was one on Nickelodeon or
Cartoon Network.
Cartoon Network, yeah. Where it's some of their characters are talking about you have to see color. And yes, people, I mean, especially like me, I went to school in the 70s when it was all about don't see color. And so it's a shocking reversal, and things will eventually begin eating themselves. Racial things like this always do, especially once you start pitting the different shades against each other. And also, you're pitting blacks against Hispanics, many of whom look perfectly white but still cling to a Hispanic identity. So those groups are also not quite getting along, because to a black person, someone like Oscar Isaac is a white man. I mean, Oscar Isaac is just a white guy. And he may claim to be Hispanic, and he may indeed be Hispanic, and he is indeed Hispanic, but not to a black person. So, there was Dune, the movie that came out a few months ago.
I haven't seen that one yet. I gotta see. Sorry, I love Dune.
Well,
was it good? Was it good? Did they do a good job?
I'll take a brief 2-minute interruption here to say, I think it was too good of an adaptation. I think it was too good. And what I mean by that is, I think I've talked about this with Nima before, but what I mean about that is Villeneuve is so anal about putting everything in perfectly that he doesn't condense anything, and it just makes the movie drag. You always have to condense. If you're taking books the size of the Dune books and trying to make a movie, there's always got to be times you've got to condense.
Yeah, I agree.
And so Villeneuve did not want to do any of that, and that's why you sit through 3 hours and you only get 1/3 through the first book. For people who know the books, as I do, and as perhaps you do as well, people who know the books, if you're going to tell them that the movie ends the minute Paul meets the Fremen,
oh my god,
and that's
god,
the end. That's the fucking end.
That's where the book starts.
Yeah, and what that does, along with creating fatigue, it also doesn't allow the movie to end with any kind of bang. Like this, with Empire Strikes Back, the thing why most people consider that the best of the original trilogy is that as a bridge between the first Star Wars and Jedi, it also ends on a hugely dramatic note.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a trilogy, and that's fine. But the first Star Wars ends on what you think is going to be a great victory. You think they've blown up the Death Star. Okay, you've got a great ending to the first Star Wars. Empire Strikes Back, which is a bridge between the two, but it has Darth Vader as he's the father, and he cuts off Luke's hand, and all looks dark. And then Jedi has the final victory, or at least so you think, until Lucas wanted to milk more money out of it. So Dune just ends, and you don't get any kind of even pseudo ending to speak of.
Well, and then to go with Frank Herbert's style, Frank Herbert's my favorite author, is his style is the first 2/3 of the book kind of moves slow. And then the last third is like everything goes crazy at once.
Right.
And I can't imagine splitting one of his books up into 3 different movies like that.
As for all of the flaws, and for the fan base, the David Lynch Dune was nothing but flaws. I've learned to appreciate the Lynch Dune for what it is. I've learned to appreciate the fact that the only way Lynch could actually do that movie and fit it in at like 2 hours.
Was this like the early 2000s one?
Oh, no, that was the TV movie. The David Lynch movie was 1983.
I never saw that one. Okay.
Oh, well, it's very unconnected. I mean, it's connected to the books in terms of the names, the planets, the spice. The structure is Dune, but Lynch made it a David Lynch film. He threw in all of these things. The Bene Gesserits are now working on sound vibration weapons, and I'm trying to think of what some of the very worst. I mean, Duncan Idaho's not in it at all. Duncan Idaho has like 2 scenes, and then he vanishes. The Baron is very different than the Baron in the book. However, it's a great cinematic Baron.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematic Baron from the Lynch version, played by an actor named Kenneth McMillan, a fine actor who was so fat he died too young, but that happens when
you're that fat. Yeah. If you can meet the role of the Baron, you're probably looking at that for your future, yes.
Yeah. And the Baron is not like the Baron in the book. However, cinematically, it's a great Baron. It's a Baron I can appreciate for that movie, while also appreciating that Lynch did not make it like the book. My favorite thing, now we'll get back to the topic at hand, I just want to say my favorite thing about the David Lynch Dune movie. At the end, there's a type of film credit I'm sure you've seen in certain movies, where when the movie's over and they start to show the cast, each cast member's face is shown in their name.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kyle MacLachlan as Paul, Jürgen Prochnow as Leto, So Lynch wanted that. He wanted everyone's face, and he wanted them like looking serious, not a still frame, but them like, and then their name. Meanwhile, the score, excellent score. Brian Eno and a couple of other people contributed to the score. So the score is going on, and the Lynch Dune ends, by the way, with the revelation that Paul actually is the god of the universe. Like,
oh, that's pretty
magic. I mean, it goes against everything
that's in the book.
Perfect saying. Yeah, he's magical, and to prove it, he makes it rain on Arrakis, which of course would destroy the natural environment of Arrakis. But the last thing is he has made it rain, and all the Fremen are now standing in the rain cheering. And the last line is Paul's little sister says, "It's true. He is the Kwisatz Haderach." Now the problem with that line is that when they cut the movie down to 2.25 hours,
you don't even know what that is.
Yes, they don't mention it. So in Lynch's movie, in the 1983 movie, your final line of the film references something that you haven't mentioned before.
And how can this be? For he is the Kwisatz Haderach.
You know, it would just sort of like be the last line of The Godfather. And then you'd have Michael Corleone say, well, I guess it turns out they were right about the clown trucks. Like, what are you even talking? And the movie ends. Wait a minute, clown trucks? What the hell? That's never been mentioned before. But just getting back to the credits. So she said, it's true. He is the Kwisatz. She had a terrible speech impediment. She went on to become an adult actress, but when she was a kid, she said, it's true. He is the Kwisatz Haderach. And then screen goes dark, moving ocean to show that Arrakis is now underwater, which is not good for anybody. And then the faces begin to pop up. Now, they had a problem. There's an actor in the David Lynch Dune, Leonardo Cimino, unknown guy. He has one line in the entire film, and then he vanishes. And it's not a line anybody would even remember. He's a big, bug-eyed monster with a domed... his head, it's not special effects. His head is an alien head. It is like a big, pointy, bald head. And he's got these bulging eyes. And he's just got one scene, and then he vanishes, and nobody would even remember him. But contractually, they had to put him in the closing credits, and because his last name was Cimino, the C, he comes up first. So two confusing things happen in a row at the conclusion of that film. First, the little girl says Kwisatz Haderach, which nobody's heard before, and the movie then goes dark, and you're not explained. And then, first thing is Leonardo Cimino with the big, and was this guy even in the fucking film? And why is he getting first billing over everybody else in the movie? So that's why I've learned to appreciate the David Lynch Dune. It is really enjoyable on its own level, but it does not in any way have anything to do with Frank Herbert's point in writing the books, not just the content, but his statements that he was making. But you got to enjoy it for what it is. Yeah. Anyway, to get back,
I got excited about Dune. Sorry, I helped you derail that.
I love talking about Dune. I've seen all the versions because somebody put together a 4-hour version of the David Lynch one. All the discarded footage that David Lynch shot. And because they had to explain a lot of backstory, so it has a 10-minute narrated introduction just by a random old guy. Like, in the beginning, humans invented robots that fought for their...
Oh, they went that far back. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, they wanted to bring the whole thing. And then the butler, Jihad, and the robot. And you're like, okay, who's this old guy?
Yeah.
They couldn't shoot those scenes, so they just drew them. So there are like pencil drawings of the robots, pencil drawings of the Butlerian Jihad, pencil drawings of the discovery of Arrakis and the spice. Meanwhile, the old guy's like, I learned! And you're like, we don't even know who the fuck this guy is. But then they intercut with the actress who plays Princess Irulan, Virginia Madsen, who does the narration in the theatrical version of the Lynch film. So the old guy keeps getting interrupted by her. He's like, the Mentats came, and then she goes, and the Mentats, and then he comes back, and it's like they're fighting for screen time. Would you let me finish my fucking narration? Screw you! I'm a lead actress, and it's just part of what is so funny that every version of the Lynch film. I mean, I do recommend it just for that artistic value. They shot the whole thing in Mexico to be as cut rate as possible, and they were shooting. The actors had to be in like 110-degree desert in still suits that were impossible to get out of without help, but also they were eating food that was giving them diarrhea. So every actor from the set of that Dune has a story about being out in the middle of the desert with no bathroom nearby in a suit that takes 10 minutes to get out of. And with you diarrhea. Start to feel, yeah. So it was a joy. Nobody remembers that movie fondly. A lot of people met good friends on it and worked together after that. And David Lynch discovered his muse, Kyle MacLachlan, who would end up being in a lot of David Lynch films. And Patrick Stewart, who plays Gurney, became very good friends with Sting, who plays Fade. And at the time, for 83, the Police was a big band. The Police was topping the charts on the alternate charts. Sting was a heartthrob. Patrick Stewart had never heard any popular music in his life. He was a Shakespearean actor, and he had no idea. So first day on the set, everyone's introducing each other, and Patrick Stewart goes up to Sting, and says, well, what's your name? Sting. Oh, and what do you do? Well, I'm just a musician. Oh, in what have I heard of you? And he goes, the Police. Patrick Stewart went through the whole movie thinking the guy was a cop. He had never heard of the band, the Police. Yeah. So only at the end of the movie, he's like, so where's your precinct? He's like, precinct?
It's on this guitar, yeah.
Yeah. But they became very good friends after that. So, I mean, certainly some good came out of the movie. But anyway, I love talking about Dune so much, I could do another 20 minutes, but we'll get back to it.
Yeah, me too. We'll do another show on Dune in the future. How about that?
Absolutely. But the reason I brought up Dune in the first place is because you have certain actors in it who are sort of ethnic but not, like Oscar Isaac. Blacks are claiming the movie is too white, whereas on paper it's not, because they did try to fill the roles with like Jason Momoa and some other, and then they shoehorned in a black woman to play Dr. Kynes, and that really doesn't work at all.
That's really weird. Yeah.
Some wise Whoopi Goldberg-looking woman. And of course Zendaya, but Zendaya's mixed race. So blacks are more and more even against mixed race actors. I mean, they genuinely do want everybody to look like an Australian Aborigine. They just don't want any trace of human evolution.
So are you suggesting that they may be suggesting some sort of master race?
It is a kind of ethnic purity that is highly reminiscent of both the Nazi era and apartheid, because South African apartheid, because in the Nazi era, and I don't have to tell anyone this, your viewers are all intelligent enough to know all this, but in the Nazi era, you were judged by whether you 1/4 Jew, half Jew, 3/4 Jews, and you could kind of get different rights depending on how little Jew you had in you. But they took this thing really seriously. They had departments of racial science, and they had entire government agencies just to determine how much Jew was in a person. And same with Slavs, that they would try to segregate the truly Slavic Slavs from the Slavs who might have been initially Germans who emigrated to the East. And so And then apartheid in South Africa, they did the same thing because it wasn't just black and white; they had Indians as well, because the British brought over Indians. That's Gandhi was one of those Indians who worked for the British in South Africa. Gandhi hated the native blacks. He once
I was
said
going to bring that up. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Gandhi once said, "The natives live a life of naked indolence. The continent is rightly that of the white man." Gandhi is not well liked in like southern and western Africa. So because you had Indians as well in South Africa, your privileges, your rights and privileges were determined by your category, whether you were pure black or whether you were the middle ground, which Indian blood. There were still things you couldn't do, but you could do a lot more. I mean, Gandhi was a lawyer in South Africa. And then you had, of course, whites. So when you get into this kind of racial categorizing, where you're looking at purity, where you're actually just straight out demanding racial purity, that's when you know you've gone nuts. And that's when you know that it's just gone too far, especially in a business where you're conducting this crusade in the name of diversity. Of course, nothing that's done in the name of diversity today is actually for diversity. It is almost always something that's anti-white or anti-something. Because the business was plenty diverse to begin with. I mean, before they started the racial caps quotas. I am asked frequently by young actors who are just starting out. In fact, I just finished two casting gigs within the last couple of months. So this is all very fresh to me. And I get asked a lot what they should do because agents are not representing them right now. And my first piece of advice to them is always, is there anything in your family history that is non-white? Did you ever have an ancestor who lived in Peru? Does anyone on your mother or father's side of the family have any drop of Arabic or
Hispanic,
Latino,
yeah,
or anything? Yeah, and if they do, I said, okay, go back and find the family name back then and change yours to that. Don't be Gloria Simmons, be Gloria Jimenez, or Gloria Makamaka Akbar or something like that. So, and if they say no to that, if they say no, we're German Swedes going back 2,000 years, then I'll say, well, fake it then. But every now and then you come across an actor who can't fake it. They are simply so Grace Kelly white in their features that there really would be no way for them to fake being Hispanic or being Arabic or something like that. These are the people who are genuinely screwed by design. They say it's a feature, not a bug. The whole idea was to try to get people, especially women like that, off TV, off the screen. So it is kind of working out how it's supposed to. The question is, how long can it hold? Now, people will ask me when I talk about this, they will say, but Dave, all my friends go, but Dave, isn't it true that China and India, those big markets, they don't want to see black faces. They don't want to see Shirley from What's Happening. I hope I make that a meme. I just hope people bring Shirley from What's Happening back. And it is true. The Chinese, especially, and to a lesser extent, but to a definite extent, the Indians, several billion people in these markets, and the Chinese especially, are ravenous consumers of American entertainment. So much so that movie studios change content to make sure that Chinese are never offended. And it's true that Chinese don't want to see a bunch of black faces. However, the dynamics have changed to favor the people who are doing the apartheid. Streaming has changed the dynamics very much. If we go back to the pre-streaming days, I mean, let's just say, let's go back just 10 years, 12 years, and all the decades before that. Well, you had a dynamic that was really easy to explain. A movie gets released in a theater, and hopefully you make your money back from theater tickets, from seats, filling seats in a theater. Well, that means that you have to care about what people in Boise think about the movie. You have to care. Hollywood never wanted that, but they had to. When it's all about filling seats, then Mid-America matters and China matters, because you've got to pack people into theaters. One of the reasons streaming took over so thoroughly and so quickly is that streaming changed the definition of success. Prior to streaming, success was selling theater tickets, selling seats, and popcorn, and getting butts into seats. With streaming, and everybody now just watches at home or on their phone as they're on the subway or wherever the fuck they are, you're not dealing with selling tickets anymore. You're dealing with subscriptions. You're not dealing with individual tickets for individual movies or shows. So the definition of a successful show, like something that is very successful, like the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Everybody loves that show, but not really in Boise. Not watched all that much. It's not watched all that much in other parts of the world. China wouldn't be able to figure it out. I mean, it's such a unique, very specific Jewish female comedian in the 50s. The Chinese would be like, oh, we're not a fan. Guy Aoki, that one's for you. I did an extra one just for you, you son of a bitch. So because of streaming, everything got downsized. And what counts as a successful show no longer has to play in China, no longer has to play in Boise. Now, Hollywood loves this because it did free them from Mid-America. And then the pandemic came along and made everything, it just sealed all of that, sealed the fate, where theaters, even now, people are still not going back to theaters, even in states that are redder, even in states where they're not that worried about triple masking and 500 boosters and all that. The theater business has been killed and replaced. What we're going to have in the future, for the next couple of years, there will only be a small number of movies where theaters matter, and it'll be the Marvel films, the IMAX movies. It'll be a small number of very expensive movies where it matters how they do in China, where it matters how they do in Boise. But the majority, 90-something% of everything else will be small screen, where it can be successful without a single Chinaman liking it, not a single Jub in Gujarat liking it, not a single redneck in Boise liking it. So that's why.
And quick interruption. Is that because it got put onto the streaming service, and they're not making money for every time somebody watches it? They're making money because they got on the streaming service on Netflix or whatever, right?
The producers will sell the thing to Netflix. Netflix makes money by selling subscriptions.
Right.
So as you said, they're not selling tickets to individual things. So Netflix profits just as long as you subscribe. They don't care what you watch. Now they care if they start losing subscriptions, of course, but their gimmick, which has long been written about, this is not Dave's wisdom, this has been written about a lot, Netflix's gimmick, is that they just like new content. They are more likely to bring in something new than to continue something that's already had 3 seasons. That's why a lot of Netflix shows.
Also, their pricing model, I would say, subsidizes lower quality content to some extent. At least takes a little longer to get it off the screen.
Very true. Very true. So Netflix, it doesn't matter to them the same way that it used to matter to movie studios, how many tickets they would sell. And when you had to worry about that, that's when you really had to worry about China. That's because a movie could do poorly in United States theaters, and China could make up the difference in like 1 week. You could make your money back from some overblown big budget piece of crap. You'll still get those because the public still has an insatiable appetite for Marvel films and superhero stuff. And China loves that stuff. China loves big green screen explosions and handsome heroes and all of that. You'll still get that, but that's going to be tiniest minority of what's out there, meaning that the 90% of all the roles for actors will be in the smaller stuff. So that as long as the apartheid rules over the streaming stuff, and that means actors are screwed. White actors are screwed right now. I don't have any optimistic news for the young ones who are asking me these questions. I am helping a few of them. Dave's a helpful man every time beautiful young women are involved. If they are not, I am exceptionally unhelpful. Without attractive young women in the picture, I'm going to be late for stuff. I'm not going to pick up a check. I'm going to be irresponsible. I'm not going to do the work that you asked me to do, and I'll come up with some ridiculous excuse. I got mauled by a bear. My foot fell off. I got caught in a bear. I got mauled by a bear, then got caught in the bear trap that was supposed to catch the bear, and I had to chew my own foot off. And that's why my column is late. But once there are attractive women involved, I become the most helpful man to ever draw breath. So a couple of these young actresses, the ones who really are quite screwed, the ones who just don't have anything that can give them a leg up to fight against the racial cap.
Well, it would seem like an opportunity for a competing streaming service to arise and resolve this problem, right?
Oh, I think that there are smart enough people somewhere out there in the business who are realizing that at the moment you can get beautiful, talented white actors to work for pretty much free because they just, give them meals. Give them meals.
Also, you haven't talked about the industry where white actresses still do very well and are still very sought after.
Oh, yes. Well, that is like the young lady who lived with me, who was an adult star. The thing about porn is every time some idiot gets the idea to try to diversify porn, it's the black guys who get angry at them because what they want to see is white women doing stuff to black men or getting it done to them by black men. So if anyone ever tries to say, we should diversify porn, and you'll get 1,000 angry black guys beating the shit out of you because having white women in porn is essential. So yeah, that women can certainly go into that, except it's one of those things you're either willing to do or you're not. It's very rare you'll find an actress who's had a dream of being on Broadway her whole life, and then she gets decided, or maybe I'll suck a dick. Yeah, yeah. Normally, you have to have lived a certain life. You have to have certain daddy issues. You have to have certain
self-esteem issues. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am trying in a couple of small ways to, and what I've been realizing is, as I've been trying to help some of these actresses, at the talent agencies, the ones where I have contacts, there's a small resistance forming to this apartheid. A lot of the agents don't like what they're being forced to do. If you've gone into being an agent because you like actors, then you're not going to want to see actors abused. Now, the people become an agent for all variety of reasons. Sometimes they might just want to make money. Sometimes they like the idea of exploiting stupid people. Most actors are dumb, so you get to exploit dumb people. But every now and then you get a talent agent who really does like actors. And so the talent agents who fall into that category have a small cell of their forming of resistance. And I think you're going to see that build, and it will probably, if it breaks, if the system just starts to disintegrate, it will probably be because leftists and racial theorists in general, racial hustlers in general, always overplay their hand. They cannot help it. Hence, that's what's starting to happen with the dark-skinned versus the light-skinned black actresses who are fighting. You always end up overplaying your hand, and it will get to the point and I was talking to a couple of people who read my column this week, and they were telling me that they sometimes just get sick and tired of clicking around Netflix and not seeing anything of interest. It'll get to the point where the stuff that's on streaming becomes so similar. Noble black person does this. Noble black person does that. A family of noble blacks do this. And once Netflix begins seeing a serious enough drop in subscriptions and no new pickup of new subscriptions to make up the difference, and when the same starts to go for Hulu and starts to go for Amazon Prime, you'll eventually see why it's sort of creeping back. And there won't be an announcement. It'll be similar to police defunding, where summer of 2020, every leftist demanded defund the police. Now, in our year of terrible crime, where politicians have seen how badly it's all gone, you're seeing, number one, you're seeing leftists from last year saying, we never said defund the police. Well, I said, oh, no, I never said that. And then you're seeing police budgets being restored. Secretly, though. No mayor is announcing,
proclaiming, I have restored the police budget. Yeah.
But it's happening. They're hiring again. Some of the old timers who wanted to retire are coming back. And that's what you'll see with the Hollywood racial apartheid. Eventually, Netflix will start to see its numbers suffer, and the other streaming services will as well. And you will start to see black actors simply creeping back. Agents will begin signing them again. Casting directors will begin seeing them again. I predict that'll probably start happening in about a year. I think white actors...
I think it'll go down that fast? Yeah.
Yeah. I think white actors are going to have a tough time for most of next year. I think they're going to have a very bad spring and not a good summer. But I think by this time, like Thanksgiving, Christmas of next year, I think you will begin to see a rehiring. So I don't consider it permanent, but it is difficult, especially getting back to young white actresses. They have a very short shelf life of when they can be considered an ingenue. In Hollywood, for women, 25 is the cutoff. After 25 years old, you are over the hill if you are not already established. Obviously, if you're already established, you're in, and you can be Meryl Streep. You can be the old bat from Titanic. You can keep going. But if you're not known yet, once you get to be 25, they're not going to take you on as a young ingenue. So there are these actresses who are 19 or 20 or 21. They hear the clock ticking. They can't waste a year. It's deadly for them to waste a year. It's like, I think there was some comedian, you talk about like fruit flies that only live one day. So like if the fruit fly misses breakfast, he's had a bad childhood. You know, their time clock is different. For an actress, losing a year is like losing a quarter of your life. So that's part of why this is psychologically very difficult for a lot of the actresses who are not able to find representation and not able to find work because they know that they've got a limited time before they're not going to be ingenues anymore, and they're not going to be taken on for reasons of age. Whereas right now it's because of reasons of race. So a lot of them are looking at a bad situation where the minute the race thing ends, but now they're old and the age thing begins. So it's not a good time to be like a 20-year-old, attractive, very white, attractive young actress. It's just not a good time for that. But I do try to help where I can, and I have been connecting with those agents who are unhappy with the system, and in my own very small way, because very limiting what I can do, because I can never attach my name to anything because I still have a certain level of toxicity publicly. But in whatever little ways I can, I am trying to make a difference. And see, again, that's Helpful Dave, and you're not going to see him around very much longer. But just get a blonde in the room, and I'll come back. And I'm sort of like Frosty the Snowman. Helpful Dave melts away. And then some beautiful ice queen from Scandinavia comes in the room, and I'm back again. Hey, happy birthday, everybody! I'm Frosty. So you might not see this side of Dave again for a while, but every now and then he comes out.
That's hilarious. Dave, I know you said earlier that you had about an hour. I feel like we're beyond that hour. I hanging in there.
Oh, I'm doing fine. You know, it's not. I love you guys so much, and I love this show so much. I would do a whole nother hour. It's just I have someplace I gotta be.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How close are we to that?
Oh, 5 more minutes. I should probably head out. I mean, if you guys have any follow-up questions or anything like that. But
here's the most.
It's a rainy day out here in LA, so people are driving slow and everything's going slow outside. So I have to just make sure to give myself some time.
Let's get to where it's important. So the left has learned their lesson from decades ago when they tried to bring in all the hobos for actors, and that failed miserably. And then they got a better idea, and it appears to be working. What can the right learn from this?
Well, and this is the point I made in my column. This is really a key takeaway for those of you who don't care about Hollywood. Those of you who maybe tuned out when we started listening to talking about Dune, maybe you've come back now. The left learned from its mistakes. It's not like they sat down at a chalkboard when the first push in 2002 failed. It's not like they set a team on it, because leftists oftentimes are not that bright, and you get a bunch of university types, and they're just going to do stupid things. They're not really going to come up with anything constructive. They learned by simply observing circumstances. They kind of understood, okay, the thing with the hobos and the casting directors didn't work because casting directors didn't like it. They got pissed off, and because the hobos were not talented, and that didn't work. And then it took George Floyd, but George Floyd was like an inspiration, a spark of inspiration, where they we can now build something way better for us than we were trying to in the early 2000s. We can actually, they did that whole thing of saying the quiet part out loud. It used to be you're not supposed to say that you want to prevent whites from working. Now that was something no leftist would ever say out loud.
Now if you don't say it, you're not a leftist.
Exactly. So the dynamics have changed, and whether consciously or just by being attentive, because even the lowest animal can be attentive and can learn. Even a dog will learn who's the friendly person who feeds him and who's the mean guy who kicks him. Even rodents learn. So, but just by observing what's around them and picking up vibes, so even the dumbest people still can pick up on things. And the left realized...
No insult to rodents, of course, comparing them with leftists. No insult to rodents.
Yes, absolutely. Rodents would certainly make better mayors and governors than most, or any Democrat, I would say. So the left, the bottom line is, whether consciously or not, the left was able to change its game when circumstances allowed. Now that is so important for anyone with a goal, with a political goal, be it a positive goal or a negative goal, but it's so incredibly important that you move with circumstances and change your game accordingly. And I make the point in my column. And I wrote that column before. There's a piece yesterday in the Wall Street Journal about how Hispanics are now pretty much equally divided between the two parties. And what the right can take advantage of, because now when we go to immigration, we see the left making mistakes kind of similar to what they were doing in 2002 when their diversity push failed. One of Biden's biggest errors this year, and he's made so many of them, but in terms of a self-own, an error that is going to hurt him, is when he let in those 100,000 Haitians. You saw a very specific and abrupt, you'd already had a rightward shift among Hispanics, started a few years ago, and then increased last year. But the minute all those Haitians began to pour in, Hispanics really started to change their tune on immigration, especially just when it came to enforcement, close the border, seal the border, enforcement. The left is operating under this notion that there is black and brown unity. And there is so little unity that's why dark-skinned actors, black actors, and light-skinned black actresses are fighting now. There is no unity. These people have not a single sense of unity. So the minute that Hispanics, especially in these Texas border areas, the minute they see a bunch of third world black people pouring in, they're not thinking unity. They're thinking close that fucking border. The right, we need to change our game as circumstances change. We have to, I think the appeal for people like me who absolutely want to seal the border, close the border, deport, and do all the things.
Turn off immigration for 10 years. Yeah. I don't know if that, yeah.
We have to start to realize that things are changing a bit. There is an opening that has not existed before with Hispanics. And it's an opening that seems to be exploitable. Now, that's a different thing. People always get on my case when I say something like that. I'm not saying Hispanics are natural Republicans. That's an idiotic thing to say about any group, really, especially a group as diverse as Hispanics, because there's no one race of Hispanics. And you're dealing with Cubans versus Mexicans versus Venezuelans and Hondurans and all that. It's not a matter of saying that anybody's a natural anything. It's a matter of saying there's an opening. There's an opening that circumstances have created. And we have to maybe lose some of the memes and catchphrases of the past and open our eyes to what's going on and exploit it. We might not, the right might not be able to get all of what it wants. I mean, Hispanics are definitely, when it comes right now, at least present polling, when it comes to sealing the border and rigorous enforcement, they are on the right side of that. However, when it comes to the dreamers, the people who have been here for a certain number of years, they don't want to see the dreamers deported. Okay, so you take what you can for whatever you get, realizing you're not necessarily going to get all of what you want from any one group. But you look at changing circumstances, you apply it to the goal that you have, especially when it is a complex goal. The whole border issue is complex because it involves many states. It involves both federal law and stuff on the ground in different states. And it involves different departments. I mean, it's way different. It's not like just, Trump tried to do so much via executive order, which was always a bad strategy because if anything you bring into existence just by signing it by executive order, it can be taken out of existence just by the next guy signing something new. But there are certain things that are too complex to do just by executive order. There are things Trump could have done much more unilaterally if he had wanted to. I mean, he just didn't want to. There were things he could have done about the wall that he could have tried to do without Congress. He just had no interest in doing it. But I'm just making the point that when you're dealing with any complex issue, is always make sure to be aware of changing circumstances and make sure that you're not 2 years behind where things are now. And that's why the left was so successful in exploiting George Floyd. I can't think of, they had tried that with Ferguson. They had tried to exploit Ferguson. The Ferguson Michael Brown thing in Ferguson was where BLM kind of first became a national thing. But Michael Brown couldn't, that particular situation, as much as they tried to popularize Hands Up, Don't Shoot, which never happened, but as much as they had entertainers on the Grammys going Hands Up, Don't Shoot, and all of that bullshit, the Michael Brown thing didn't catch on. It didn't give them the visual. And it's what Michael Brown was just a fucking thug, but also there was no visual of a guy with the neck and a guy going, oh, regardless of how he died. That visual was powerful. I mean, it putting aside what the coroner's reports would end up showing, putting aside any of that, everybody agreed that's a powerful visual. And the left was very quick. Again, instinctively. You don't even have to call them smart. It is just the instinctive nature of an animal to do certain things. And they pounced on that, on those visuals. And I mean, it's fairly similar to what happened 30 years ago with the Rodney King beating. You've got a hugely powerful visual, shorn of context, but still very powerful. But there was no internet back then. There was, I mean, it was limited. Kind of, L.A. got the riots, but there weren't any riots in other cities for Rodney King. It didn't really catch on as a national thing, but in part that was because we were not connected like we are now. So you've got to give the left credit. They saw an opening, they took it, but they are currently overplaying their hand. Well, if they overplayed their hand with police defunding, they overplayed that hand already. They will overplay their hand with the apartheid, the racial apartheid in Hollywood thing. But next year sometime is when that will start to disintegrate.
Well, that about wraps it up for the conversation today. I know you got to get going, so thank you again for coming on and enlightening us with all sorts of fun stories. And thanks, Nima, here as well for being. I know you're the co-host, but I'm typically the one here pushing it. So this has been Dylan Moore with IRETA TV, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
You bet.